Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. Alright, on to today's stories, let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Medium Savings 4968. Keep firing, Marine. Not sure if this one counts as malicious compliance, but you guys tell me. So my dad, born in the early 1950s, volunteered and enlisted in the Marines. Willingly, I might add, at the age of 17, near 18. He stayed in the Marines for a full tour during the Vietnam War effort, but Dad was disappointed to find out, due to the surviving son clause, he would never get to see battle. Dad worked hard as a missile tech, support, and then he was reassigned to a desert base, not named. He was made part of a special operation group that tested out the latest weapon systems from the developers. So one day the sergeant walks in and asks for volunteers to fire a brand new radar-aimed pew-pew system. Note here that it was radar-aimed, but still required for someone to sit in the chair and actually fire the thing. It was designed for anti-air defense, but they wanted to see if it could repel ground-based units, or at the least suppress them. The room got excited as everyone wanted to be a part of it, but nobody wanted to sit their keister in the firing chair. The sergeant screams at everyone saying, there has to be somebody in here who's good at aiming a pew-pew. Suddenly, everyone started recommending my dad. Voices called out, get Bobby over there, he's the craziest SOB who ever shot a pew-pew. Yeah, Bobby, he'll shoot anything. Bobby's the best aim out of all of us. Bobby tests stuff like this all the time. Yeah, they pawned off the duty to my dad. My dad didn't know the difference, and he liked shooting anything new and classified. Now declassified and way obsolete. The sergeant grabs Dad and nominates him for the job. So they drive Dad out to the test site, and he was given the scenario. Your targets, Marines, are somewhere in the distance. He points to a dot in the distance. What we have here is a fake contingency of troops, armor, and equipment. Tonight, in the blessed AM, you men will set this pew-pew system up as fast as possible. Then you will fire the weapon, giving it all hell. Is that understood? Dad and his team said, sir, yes, sir. My dad and his team do some test runs just with the setup and then get some shut-eye. So about 2 AM, the siren goes off. Dad's team, half dozed but ready and alert, race to the equipment. They hook it up to a Jeep and drive it to position. They put it in place, putting the anchors down. The pew-pew comes online. Dad gets his targets on radar. Dad lets the pew-pew go crazy on the target. Clack, 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 etc. The pew-pew fires what feels like dozens of rounds. Dad checks the radar screen and looks puzzled. The sergeant asks him, what in the heck happened, Marine? Well, sir, I'm not at all sure. I shot the heck out of the target, but according to radar, it's still standing there. It's still pinging me back. Did you miss? Did you just get your platoon wiped out? Did you fail your fellow Marines? Did you fail your mission? He pauses. Break it all down and do it again. My dad and his team break it all down, pull the system back to base camp. So about 3 AM, the siren goes off. Dad's team races to the equipment again. They hook it up, drive to the position, they anchor, and Dad gets his targets on radar. Dad lets the pew-pew go crazy again. Clack, 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 etc. The pew-pew fires more rounds. Dad checks the radar screen and, still puzzled, the targets remain. The sergeant checks the screen over. You just wiped out your entire battalion by missing, Marine. I told you to nail the target and didn't bring one down. But Sarge, listen, I'm almost certain we're hitting it. By my calculation, the targets should be Swiss cheese by now. I think we should inspect the targets first before we waste more rounds. You think, Marine? You're ordered to sit in that chair a third time, and well, this time will be a perfect run, as I will supervise the whole shebang. 4 AM hits. My dad and the team are in perfect sync. If you slowed it down to the slow motion, you would see them moving in grace of any dance troupe. The pew-pew gets set up in the fastest time on record. Dad aims and fires. Clack, 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 etc. Dad, warm in the chair, says, Sir, we're hitting it, but fire, Marine. But sir, okay, cue malicious compliance. The sergeant interrupts. I said fire, Marine, fire now. Clack, 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 etc. Fire till either you expend your ammo or you overheat. Am I clear? Clack, 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 etc. Dad's team reloads the weapon system as the ammo runs low again and again until the ammo is out. I'd say it was a minute from overheating, at least by Dad's words. Dad checks the radar. The target remained. The sergeant throws his hat and binoculars on the ground. Don't know why he had them, it was night, and the target, even with the binoculars, couldn't be seen. At 5 a.m. and first dawn, they drive towards the targets. The targets grow in size. The targets end up being 2 Sherman tanks, 2 half-tracks, and a bunch of Scarecrow dummies, all originally headed for the scrap heap, with a brick wall that had been hastily set up behind it. Everyone was surprised to find Dad's pew-pew had turned them all into Swiss cheese. They were able to shine lights through huge holes in the armor plating. The dummies were missing whole sections of their chests, heads, and others even knocked off their posts. The half-tracks were all but nothing, and the back wall had huge divots. Obviously, the pew-pew had gone clean through the armor and hit the back wall. Dad murmurs smugly, "Think it worked, Sarge. Think I hit it." The Sarge threw his hat to the ground and did a little rage dance upon it. Yeah, this is about as close as you're going to get to Fallout. Another detail went out later that day to not only clean up the mess, but they started running metal detectors over the sand around and behind the targets. The system had accurately hit its targets without spray around the area. The metal detector team found projectiles that had gone through the wall. The weapon array went on to be scrapped before mass production. Dad never got those details. Who knows? Budget, efficiency, feasibility, who really knows? The pew-pew's control and aim system would end up being used in a variety of systems later on, until that became obsolete. That sergeant gave Dad every fire control job and testing system after that until he was discharged. Okay, first of all, let me address pew-pew, because I know some of you who are new here aren't going to realize why we do that on this channel. It's literally because of YouTube age restriction. If I use the word there how many times it is in this story instead of pew-pew, then I'm gonna get age restricted, and this video won't be pushed out anywhere near as much as the other ones would. Alright, with that out of the way, let's take a look at this story really quickly because at the end here, the sergeant gave OP's dad the chance to play with every new toy that came in. I mean, come on. That sounds to me like a pretty darn good deal for being the cannon fodder that sits in the firing seat. This story comes to us from Illuminatus Prime. Don't care what I do? Fine with me. Back in late 2020, when everyone was working from home, I was tasked with upgrading office PCs. This involved removing each hard disk drive, setting it aside, replacing the PC with a newer model that uses a solid-state drive, transferring all documents and images from the hard disk drives to the solid-state drives with a special USB setup of my very own, and disposing of the old hard disk drives per the project manager's orders, which were as you see fit. Now, because there was no one else in the building, so I thought, I had all 20 new PCs lined up in the shipping area with the old hard disk drives on a cart ready to be copied over. The assistant project manager walked in, maskless of course, and wanted to know what the heck I was doing. Before I could get 3 words out, he tells me to remove my mask because he said there ain't no effing COVID, or words to that effect. I stepped back, removed my mask, and tried again. He interrupted me again to ask what the heck these hard drives are doing here. I tried to explain, and he interrupted me one more time to tell me he doesn't give a darn about my excuses and to just get rid of them. Just as I was about to try once more, he tells me he doesn't care how I do it, just to effing get rid of them. Throw them in the dumpster or take them home for all I care. And to get those PCs installed immediately. Cue the malicious compliance. Sir, yes sir. I put my mask back on and wheeled the cart of hard disk drives out to my SUV, parked near the dumpster, and loaded the crate into the back. Then I went back inside and delivered each new PC as instructed. The old PCs had already been palletized and were slated to be picked up by an electronic surplus business. After all this, I drove home, prepared a pizza, cracked open a cold one, and started my weekend. My weekend. The following Monday, I felt lousy. The COVID test showed positive. I had already been vaxxed and boosted, so my doc told me to just stay home and monitor my symptoms. I logged in remotely and sent the "I got it" email, then checked my inbox. The first new email I saw was from the assistant program manager, reiterating his orders to me almost word for word. The second email was from the assistant program manager to his boss and the rest of the engineering staff, claiming full credit for getting the new PCs installed in record time. After an hour or so, I started seeing emails from different people asking where their files were. Of course, I did a reply all and included a screenshot of the assistant project manager's first email. All heck broke loose. The dumpster had already been emptied by the time anyone got to it. Important files were missing and presumed destroyed. The assistant project manager called me on speakerphone and told me to come in and fix everything. "Sorry boss, but I'm showing symptoms and my COVID test is positive. Unless you are willing to empty the building and then disinfect it afterwards, I had better stay home." The assistant program manager's boss chimed in and told me to stay home, get well, and call if I needed anything. "Okay boss, I'll see what I can do about the F up from home." I continued to work from home for that whole week, mostly copying each hard disk drive document and images to the relevant PC. Even though there were a few glitches, I was able to get everything back in order. The fallout: I told the assistant program manager's boss my side of the story and received a token reprimand. The assistant program manager was dismissed. I retired a few years later. No COVID deniers were physically harmed during the execution of this malicious compliance. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Xenolog1. It says, "Nice one, and kudos to the assistant program manager for documenting his screw up by sending those emails. What seems odd, were those files really important? Or who presumed them destroyed only because the hard disk drives were presumed to already be in a landfill? Or didn't they simply know they could restore them from the backups? What I'm trying to bring across, if a file is important, there should be a good backup of it, including regular tests of the recovery procedure in general. If there isn't a backup, by definition, the file cannot be important. Way too many ways it can get lost or destroyed. Theft of hardware, hardware error, software error, user error, flood, earthquake, thunderstorm, tornado, malware, to name some possibilities. And even if you consider all of those possibilities as only remotely possible, when the file is lost, it doesn't matter to you and your boss if the chances to lose it were slim or high. Someone will feel the backlash. OP responded to this one and said, "You are correct, there should be backups. There were by the time I retired. Those were important documents. Yes, they assumed the hard disk drives were on their way to a landfill. And yes, I should have said something." It takes a near disaster like this to pound home the necessity of good backups. I have 2 multi-terabyte drives just for this purpose. One is currently connected, the other is inside my Pew safe. Note that while I was not in part of the IT department, I was still tasked with doing the PC upgrade just because. By the way, the first email was sent only to me. I guess the assistant program manager just wanted to reiterate his authority without considering the possible consequences. Another commenter down below called 30 Mile Sniper said, "Received a token reprimand? That doesn't sit well. I've had people trying to blame me for their crap in the past. Each time I drag them in front of witnesses and tear strips off of them." OP responded to this one and said, "The token reprimand was for not telling anyone that I still had the hard disk drives. This in spite of the fact that the assistant program manager told me to either put them in the dumpster or take them home. And both he and his boss originally expressed indifference to their eventual fate. They knew it and I knew it, so there was not much venom behind the reprimand I received. Yeah, I probably should have mentioned it as soon as the panic set in, but again, I was just complying with their orders." The assistant program manager trying to take credit for what you did is just unbelievable. Actually, no, that's wrong. It is believable because there are so many horrible managers out there. And let's just touch on the backups here because they should have been in place when the first little bit of data was saved to a computer there. Backups are important. Every business needs to have them. We can't really harp on OP for that one though, as they said they weren't part of the IT team. They were just tasked with setting up the new computers for some reason. But the IT team in this case, they might be a little incompetent if that system wasn't in place in the first place. This story comes to us from Plasma Flare 34. Boss ignores my background and learns the F around and find out lesson all idiots do. I worked as a care staff for a private company of 250-ish employees that deals with special needs individuals, mental disabilities, and often physical ones. We have day hab facilities and group homes. In a prior job, I did the same for the state, but was moved to an IT role after a while until the stupid from upper management became too great. Whole other story. Before any of that, I was an EMT, and before that, I was in the army, and know how to cover my own butt. Backstory complete. My boss sent out an email to all staff, and had an in-person company meeting because I put on a form the state inspectors look at that said, client returned from day trip sunburned, disoriented, and dehydrated. Staff with the client reported they passed out. Apparently heat exhaustion, reported to RN and state authority for possible neglect. Apparently, the RN never looked at the report before the state auditors came in a week later, although she did look at the client and agreed with me about the heat exhaustion the next day when she was back in the office from a day off. Fast forward 9 days, we have an emergency company meeting. Boss hands out a paper specifically telling every staff they are not to do anything outside the scope of their job description, and they are not doctors, while staring at me the whole time. She calls me out specifically during the meeting by name. Alright, fine. I stopped doing anything but the exact wording of my original hiring duties. 2 months pass. One day, I get a call about a problem with the computers at the main office in San Antonio. My job is over an hour away. I had traditionally done all the IT troubleshooting, as I was one of the first hires of the company, and I had a background for it. Boss calls me on my day off and asks me to drive to the main office and fix their computer system. I said to her, I cannot do anything outside of my listed duties per your order. Then I hang up and turn the phone off until dinner. After I turn the phone back on, I get a call within 10 minutes from the company owner. He, who had been nothing but nice to me up until now, just bluntly asks, when I felt like doing my job and getting things working, but especially payroll, don't want to get paid tomorrow? Get your butt in gear, son. That may indeed have been the wrong way to start a conversation with someone who wasn't being paid extra for their IT problems. I referred him to the email and in-person letter boss had put out. Then I pointed out how company policy had a no pew-pews rule, but he specifically always carried a 1911 to all company meetings and events on his right hip, calling it out by model as a Kimber 4. I then politely advised him to find a way to deal with his own problems, as the computers being bricked wasn't one of mine, but paying employees, such as me, was one of his, per state and federal law. And I hung up. Turned my phone off again until I was at work 2 days later. In that time, apparently 3 staff had quit from failing to be paid, 18 more were threatening to, and the owner had driven over to have a chat with boss and myself. They laid out that as a senior care staff, my job role had expanded over the years I was there, 5 at that point, and I countered that the pay hadn't, at all since I'd been hired. My doing IT work was a charity from me, not a job requirement, and I appreciated none of the disrespect I have gotten lately from either of them. I also pointed out that I knew full well that a contract IT company would cost them at least hundreds, if not thousands for a consult, and at least $200 an hour. And if I deigned to fix their problem, it would take about 3 hours. Owner offered me a 50-cent raise and 3 hours overtime. I countered with a public apology in front of all staff from boss, a $3 an hour raise, and an exemption from the no carry pew-pew policy he was being hypocritical about. They said no, so I said I'll be in the back with the clients doing my job duties, and let me know when they contacted an IT company and changed their minds. Keep in mind that all the computer systems were effectively bricked at this point, so the nurses can't do any charting, no one can bill time for casework, the state paperwork, while largely paper, can't be sent. It took them 4 days, who knows how many calls to computer specialists for quotes, and another 8 quitting employees to agree to my conditions, after 4 tries to get me to let go of the concealed carry one. That was their sticking point. I don't carry a pew-pew at work and never have, even though in my state it's totally legal, but it bugged me the absolute hypocrisy of the owner. So I would have given up the raise before that. In the end, it turns out that the owner's wife deleted something she shouldn't have had access to, and it took all of 8 minutes to restore them from backups I personally had on an old hard drive I wasn't using that the company said was an unnecessary cost. Alright, so I'm up in Canada where our pew-pew culture is nowhere near the same as down in the United States, and I completely don't understand why the heck you would ever need to bring a pew-pew in on your hip when you're working in the healthcare industry. What's up with that? I do want to touch on OP only asking for a $3 an hour raise though. For all the extra work they were doing, I would have asked to be on salary instead of being hourly, because if you want to call me in at any time, I need to have a guaranteed wage. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to the favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.